the things I've mentioned. Yep.
Go for it.
That's cool.
Sorry. First one is, who are you on Twitter?
At Martyn Sibley.
Oh, that's okay, I've really worried.
Okay, cool.
The next one is, like you said, you've got a social enterprise. What is your actual enterprise, and who's funding you?
So my core offering at the moment are the webinars. So I've done a series through my blog, which a couple of companies sponsored. I'm working with a local authority, so I'm rolling out the same 5 topics, but to that local council's audience. And I've today signed a contract with Scope, so those 5 years I put in, I must have done something right. So again, that's where the funding is coming from. But I do want longer term to not sort of rely on monthly contracts, but to be a bit more strategic and maybe start creating e-books and e-courses that are affordable, because obviously the other moral of I clearly have is not to profiteer or to save people, but it's still that the work and the sort of experience that I can bring one way or another is funded, I guess. So I'm kind of working it out as we go along, as Mel and I have discussed in a jovial way, but you know, it's 2 months in, so it's early days at the moment.
Can you explain the difference between a webinar and an e-learning and e-books?
I tried. So the webinar is, as I explained, the interactive, giving a presentation. Also, that didn't mention earlier, there's a chat box, so the attendants can ask me questions throughout the webinar as well. The e-book would be quite, it would be like a PDF, quite a static, you know, almost like a Word document. And how I'm foreseeing an e-course would be sort of worksheets, videos, case studies, lots of different maybe audio files that are pulled into an e-learning course, so that while I would present helpful facts and knowledge, it would be asking questions in a kind of coaching way, so individuals could then use that for their own life. So although I wanted to go to Australia and I went to uni, you know, another individual would have a different disability and a different life ambition, but I'm sort of pulling together things that give them the tools and a mindset that they can still set their own goals and aim for that, really.
Can you give some examples of the sort of things you would cover in a webinar?
So the 5 topic areas are quite chronological. In fact, that's quite a nice question, because I've been devising more the theory. So I've been writing blogs and doing webinars and saying, this is what I experienced. And I realise that for people that don't know me, there needs to be an overarching way of explaining everything I'm doing. So I've created something called the diamond theory of life goals, basically. And I can't show you, I haven't got the diagram, but the way that it starts is narrow at the bottom. Have you heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? So it's a mixture of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you're starting with the basics going up to self-actualization, but with the social model of disability, and they're all kind of fused into this theory that I'm developing. But to answer your direct question, there's the kind of one for parents, and the importance that a 5-year-old disabled child can't make decisions about being included at school and having the right equipment and support. So it's up to the parents to try and push for inclusion. But also that will instill the values and the mindset that individual will have in later life. The second one is for teenagers, so the intricacies of hormones and your first kiss and all those things that teenagers would have worries about. And again, I'm very much using my personal experience to sort of, it's not an overly formal lecture, it's intertwining other people's experiences as well. And then it goes into independent living, so how to get an accessible house, how to find employment, how to have social care set up, so the building blocks that enable you to push on, and then leisure, travel, adventure. So that's the kind of chronology and the types of topics that I'm covering.
Okay, and you're sort of bringing this from your own experience and then from the experiences of the community.
Yes, exactly. It starts from me, but it ends with the community learning and teaching each other. And I'm, I guess, trying to provide a platform, which, coming back to social media, the social media allows me to create that platform to start discussions and to start social change.
You both seem to have How can I put it? You seem further along than people I know on the mental health side, and I do wonder whether that's a bit because well, mental health tends to be about 20-30 years behind physical disability.
In what way? What do you mean?
Behind.
Okay.
Like deemed incapable.
I could counter argue that there would be people, as Mark mentioned, that may see someone with crutches or in a wheelchair to be incapable too.
Yeah.
I mean, mental health isn't something I've not worked in that profession, so I don't personally have mental health disability. No. But I think from my personal side, some people will assume a negative aspect of me being in a chair, but I think I've learned to snuff that out quite quickly by being positive and outgoing. And I don't know if that's something that can be learned or if that's, a broader answer, but that's certainly something I would say for me personally.
It's difficult when it's actually systematised into the health service.
Yeah, and I think, the disabled community is a very disparate community, because within physical impairments there's a lot of differences, and obviously then you can go into chronic pain, chronic fatigue, mental health, so it's difficult to have one answer, one solution to the whole disability movement. But I think there are ideologies, i.e. the social model, that tries to educate society to be more inclusive and understanding.
Well, some things seem to be perfectly in common, like you want to get on with your life and pursue your ambitions, whatever, and I'd say that's common regardless.
But it would be easy, and it could be easy to say, physically I can do very little. And actually, when you mentioned your phone, I was thinking how I use a mobile phone. I turn it over 2 or 3 times in a night, as in my carers have to come and turn me. So I use my mobile to phone my PAs so they can come in and assist me, which is slightly tangential. But I could focus on, I can't roll myself, I can't walk, I can't do all these things.
You're a good deficit person.
I think it's probably harder for a person that wasn't born with a disability and that's become disabled as a result of an injury or health reasons or things like that, to struggle mentally because I think Martyn and I have, obviously we've been born with these problems, so it hasn't been a mental adjustment as such. It's there. deal with it, whereas I think if someone has become paralyzed for whatever reason, they've got the mental anguish of having been able-bodied before, to then becoming dependent on other people to do things for them.
I think there's also can be a difference, this can be physical or mental, whether it's absolutely or something that's there all the time.
But again, from what I'm trying to achieve, I think put it on the individual. So it's sort of an individual to understand the social barriers, but equally the barriers of their impairment too, and then to make an educated, reasonable look at life and say, well, what do I enjoy, what do I like? Back to Anne's chat a couple of weeks ago, what makes me happy? Surely that's a big part of why we're, when you're in life, you just want to be happy. So to then work towards, those types of things that can make you happy. But I appreciate sometimes impairments, will affect that too, but bringing that back to humanity rather than disability.
So we're not so different.
Exactly.
I think that's a fundamental sort of thing. You mentioned earlier on about talking about what made you happy. I just wondered, is there any specific app or specific sort of recent technological advancement, whether it's to do with kind of mobility or whether it's to do with social media, that you've just looked at, or it's just enabled you to do something and you've just thought, wow, this is great, and it really has kind of elevated your happy levels or really eased your life in a different way suddenly? Is there anything recently that's helped?
Farmville on Facebook. So I live on the 5th floor of a block of flats. I don't have a garden. So that's as close as I'm ever going to get to tendering any plants. So that's my therapy on a daily basis.
Martyn, can I sling one at you for a second? So with a lot of web design and development at the moment, we see people talking about accessibility. Do you notice the difference when you're trawling around the internet? Do you notice the difference between an accessibility conformant website that's been designed to accommodate? I'm assuming like you've got some motor problems with your hands. I might be completely wrong.
I can tell.
Yeah. But do you actually notice any differences around the internet between something that's being designed for disabled people and not designed for disabled people? Are the people you talk to, do they like see the benefit of something that's being designed for disability, or do they not care as much?
I think overall, I would say that world isn't a big part of where I am at in a way. So I can recognise broadly if there's certainly visual impairment related sort of adaptations, or to make it more accessible. But I haven't got a keen kind of graphic or technological eye, so I don't.
So the people you're talking to, do you ever hear any chatter or griping about accessible websites, or is it not something people are talking about very much?
I'm sure like within that community there are people that would gripe here and there about the design and how it affects them, but it's not something I've been probably tuned into as much. As I say, for me, the technology is a tool, but to the sort of living life, whether that's going travelling, going to the local community and doing the things you want to do. So that's probably, there are people that would be more embedded in that world that could answer it better than I could, I think.
Could I maybe bring Andrew in at this point, actually? Sorry, back to you.
I'm just going to see the door. It's just open.
See, obviously, a lot of the work that's done at Cambridge Online is with disabled people and how they can navigate the internet better. And actually, part of his session next time is going to be around that. And he's doing some research at the moment into an e-learning project, which.
What's your background in terms of, because getting where you're coming from,
E-learning.
Okay.
But yeah, and also e-learning for especially in schools environments, there are special standards, guidelines, protocols for how to make websites or applications that are good to use, even if you can't use your fine motor coordination particularly well, if you have a vision impairment, but also deafness. Not all websites do really well with deaf people. You wouldn't think it'd matter because most of the internet is visual, but it does in some environments. So for example, if there's a video, do you have transcripts? Also for a lot of deaf people, written English is their second language, because they grow up talking with their hands. So you've got to have accessible written English for some contexts. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about, because I like to design things